All right, so we got 1.6 day 2. If you recall back, I know it was last Wednesday, right? 5 days ago that we last did this. Just as a reminder of what we saw, okay, you don't have to write this down, it's just reminding us. We took something like this, right? And we had that absolute value by itself. We split it into two, one time as written and one where we changed that 6 to a -6. Everybody remembers that, yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect. Great. So we're doing the same idea. We're just going to see different, just different slight changes in what the problem's going to look like. Okay. So the first one that we're going to see will look like this. We got absolute value 4x minus 10. This one you do want to write down. Let's go a little different. All right, what's different now? What's different, Tim? We got absolute value on both sides, right? Two different sets of absolute value. As long as the absolute values are on separate sides, that's what we want, okay? So we can have two absolute value signs as long as they're on separate sides. We can still solve it, okay? So they're on separate sides, so we're good. So we're still going to split it up into two. Still splitting it up into two equations. The first one's still going to be as written. The only thing that's different now is because we have those absolute value and I got a number in front of it, when I rewrite it, I'm not going to write it with absolute value signs. It's not just going to magically disappear and become 23x. That would be weird, right? Instead, we're going to throw it in parentheses. Okay, we're going to change those absolute value signs into parentheses on that right side. So there's our first equation. As written, we just change the absolute value into parentheses. Okay, that's good there. Now, the other one, remember we had to make that right side negative. So I'm still going to have 4x minus 10. Well, raise your hand and tell me what can I do differently on that right side now in our second equation. What do we think we're going to do?
You can make the 2 negative.
Exactly. We're going to make that 2 a negative, because that is going to make that entire side negative now. So if you got that number out in front, that's what's going to change. That number out in front is going to change from a +2 to a -2. Now I've got my 2 equations. Now we can solve it out. Okay? We're not going to solve all of our problems in the lesson today. Sometimes we'll just split it up and make sure we've got the right equations. I do want you to solve these 2. Okay, let's make sure that we are good with variables on both sides. Go ahead and solve both. Make sure we distribute correctly all of that. Of course, make sure you're showing work. Always showing work. Once you get those, check somebody, see if they got the same thing. If you're still working, keep working. But if you got it, check, see if the person next to you has the same thing. So if we didn't get -6 4/5, they're two different answers. You need to check your work versus mine and see where you went wrong. And one big thing is remember this, after I get rid of that 4x, this is a -10 that I'm bringing down. You got to remember that sign in front of the number that's still there. Some of you guys made that mistake. All right, any questions on these two? Did we get the right answer? Yes, some of us at least. Then again, hopefully you see your mistake and catch your mistake. If you're unsure of that mistake, then talk to me later. I'll point it out. We'll find it for you. I'm sure it will. All right, so the big takeaway here is being able to split it up into two, and we see those two equations. Okay. After that, it's review stuff. It's stuff we learned previously. Let's look at this. This is one that we're not going to solve. We're just going to talk about how we would split it up into our two equations. Okay, so I want you to copy it down, write it down. And then I don't want you to solve the two equations. I just want you to tell the person next to you, what are the two equations going to be? Specifically, what's that second equation going to be when we have to make it negative? Okay, talk to somebody about it.
Making it negative and going so -1x plus -2.
Second one, we gotta make that right side negative. We gotta figure out how. So we know the first one's gonna be as written, right? First one's always as written, just take away the absolute value signs. We've got that. Second one, and the real question comes in, what am I gonna do with this right side on the right one? What?
You just add.
You could turn the absolute value sign from parentheses.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because that'll make everything.
Yeah, right, so I'm gonna throw that -1 out in front, because there's a 1 out here, right? There's always a 1 in front of everything, right, if there's nothing else. So we can make that a -1. That's gonna make that whole side negative. Some of you might have just done that automatically and gotten right here, -x minus 7, completely fine. Just make sure you're making everything negative. You're changing all the signs, not just one of them. So it's not -x plus 7, it's -x minus 7. We've got to change all the signs if we're going to do that. The way to make sure we don't make that mistake of not changing all the signs is to write it like that. We've got the -1 and then in parentheses. That way we know we have to distribute that negative. So that's what we're going to do in that situation if we don't have that number up. Any questions about that? Didn't have that negative number. Like I said, we're not going to finish solving that. I just wanted to make sure we got the equations. And this time I don't even need you to write it down. Push pencils down. Obviously different now, right? Different, okay? Talk to the person next to you. What do you think we can do to be able to solve this? What do you think?
I'm just saying, I don't know. -6. Oh yeah, you add the x's first. You add the whatever. So it's gonna be 3x plus -6x.
So, let's see who heard me when I said something at the very start of this lesson. I told you what we had to do at the start of this lesson. Ian, what do you think?
You have to take away the absolute value bars and make them minus.
Nope. Nope, can't do that. Can't just take away absolute value. Here's what I think.
I said combine like terms, but I think I know it's like you have to get the absolute value bar by itself.
Okay, we do have to do the absolute value bar by itself. Okay, awesome.
Combine the two terms.
Can't combine them within the absolute value.
You just make the sign a little equal sign to look at equals zero, then it has to be equals zero.
Yeah, and why we can do that is, let's say it was, a -3 equals 0. What would we do to get this to the other side? Add 3, right? So I'm subtracting this. I gotta move this to the other side. I said I need the absolute values on either side. That's what I said at the start. You gotta have absolute values on either side of the equation. They can't be on the same. So instead, I'm gonna add this absolute value to the other side. So now I would just have, like Caitlin told us, it would be equal to each other.
I want to get
Talking through it, I want you to pay attention to what I'm talking about. So it should make sense, though. It should make sense. If you think about this, the absolute value of this minus the absolute value of this equals 0. These have to be the same, right? 6 minus 6 is 0. 7 minus 7 is 0. These two have to be the same thing. And we got them equal, okay? Now I want you to write something down about this. You don't need to write the exact problem,
Okay.
but something down about how you need to have the absolute values on opposite sides if you're going to solve it. Gotta have the absolute values on opposite sides if you're going to solve it. If you want to jot that down, you can. Just have something in your notes so when you come across it again, you know.
what if the 0 was a -3?
Yeah, we're not going to see that. We're not going to worry about it.
So it'll always be like.
Yeah, if you see this, it's going to be the 0 for now until you get to like algebra 2.
Will there ever be an occasion where there are two sets of absolute value on only one side of the equation? Like, or like. 'cause
I mean, that's what we have here, right?
Yeah, but like if there were two sets of absolute value on that side, let's say like 3 sets of absolute value on the other side, would that ever happen?
No. Not unless like they would cancel each other out or something weird like that.
Okay.
Nope, not gonna see that. Anything else on this before we move on? All right, moving on. Next thing. Okay, again, gonna look slightly different. An example that we haven't seen yet. Slightly different. What is different about this one? That we have not seen here yet. Ed?
There's a variable on both sides.
Yeah, variable on both sides, and the one on the right isn't in an absolute value, right? We saw where it was in the absolute value, now it's not. Okay, well, we know how to split this into 2, so I want you to split it up into 2 equations, and I want you to solve both. So go ahead and get some answers on this one. One's as written, one's where that right side's negative. Want to talk to me about it? Okay, so you got the same thing here. You got the same
I don't
thing.
know. I got 6 in negative. I got 6 in negative. So what I did, I did subtract 2, right? So for this one, it would be, since this is a negative one, it would be negative 6. This is negative 6. And then it's kind of obvious that you can just divide negative 6.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, negative 6. X equals negative 2. And then for the top one, same exact thing, except it's now a negative. So for the top one, I got 6 because subtract 2x, it's gonna be 12 equals 2x.
That's why I started writing my team. All right, here we go. Here we go. So you got them split up here. Okay, we send them split up. We solve it all out. We get 6 to negative 2. We good with that? 6 to negative 2. We're good. Now, we did everything correct on here. Everything correct. We did all the math, split it up, positive, negative, solved it all out. I want you to talk to somebody next to you. One of these two answers does not work. Talk to the person next to you. Which of these answers does not work and why does it not work? Figure it out. Talk to somebody.
Because
Wait, why is it negative 2? Oh, yeah, it's negative 2. It's negative 2. Yep. You said negative 2. I think. What you get? Are you smart?
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Heard a lot of good conversation out there. Will you tell me which one do we think is wrong and why do we think it's wrong here? Levi, what do you think?
-2,
Why?
because absolute value can't be equal to a negative.
Yeah, absolute value can't equal negative. And when I plug that back in, hey, the reason is not because this is a negative. I want you to understand that. It's not because my answer X is a negative. It's because when I plug it back in, I now have absolute value equals a -8. And we know absolute value cannot equal a negative. Okay, so -2 does not work in this situation. We did all the work correct, everything the right way, it just doesn't work. This is what we call an extraneous solution. Extraneous solution. It's a fancy word for extra solution. You see the word extra right in. Extraneous solution. That means we did everything right. We got our two answers, but when we plug it back in, one of them doesn't work. So we have to plug back in. In this situation, this is the situation where you have to check for it. When you have that variable over here that doesn't have an absolute value, this is where you might run into extraneous solution. Okay, Terrence?
Are you gonna see this on the homework?
Yes. Okay, so if you see this problem and we get through and we solve both of them, we get our two answers, we gotta check it, we gotta plug it back in to see if one of them is extraneous. That one is, so our answer, all you would write down for an answer is 6. That's the answer. Okay? The answer is 6. Now, on the homework, they kind of help you out with this. You see that problem, they're only gonna give you a box for one answer.
Oh.
So you're gonna know something's up, you don't have space for two answers, right? On the test, I'm not gonna give you two answers, 2 blanks, 2 boxes. I'm just gonna say solve this, and you gotta know how to do it. Okay? The other, guys, we're not done yet. I don't know why you are like packing up and stuff. Not even, this isn't even the last thing. On the test, I am going to ask you about extraneous solutions. I'm going to have you solve one of these out and ask you which one of your answers was extraneous and why. You need to know why it's extraneous. And that's because when we plug it back in, absolute value cannot equal a negative. So let me give you an example here of why it's important that we understand why. Let's say I've got absolute value is equal to x plus 4. Okay? Actually, let's change that. Let's go. This is what I wanted for this. something like this. And we solve it all out, we get our two answers are x is equal to -2 and x is equal to 6. Right, we solved it all out correctly. Raise your hand and tell me which one of these two is my extraneous solution in this situation. Caitlin? Yeah, so now the positive one is extraneous because when I plug it back in, this side is negative. Okay, so it's not because the answer was negative, it's because when I plug it back in, that right side is negative. That's the important difference, okay? Please understand that. When I plug it back in, if I were to take this 6 and plug it in, that would give me absolute value is equal to -18, and that cannot happen. Absolute value has to be positive, can't equal a negative. I plug in a -2, that gives me absolute value equals a positive number. That's okay. This doesn't work, this does. All right, and if that's confusing for you, if you don't understand it, go back and watch the video to hear it again. Come ask questions, right? Get the help that you need so that we make sure we understand it, because that stuff will be on the test. Not to mention the homework. Okay. Questions on that? Last thing. Okay, last thing here. All right, I've got absolute value. Let's go 2x plus 10 is equal to the absolute value of 8 plus 2x. Go ahead and split it up into your two equations and solve. Solve both equations here. Okay, set it up into your two equations, solve both of them. Again, make sure you're solving both equations, both equations. Sure.
I guess the second equation does not work. There's no solution.
Why?
Because you make everything negative, and you add the 2x to the first 2x, or subtract it.
Yeah.
It makes it so both x are allowed.
But I'm distributing that negative, right? So a negative 2x, so the opposite of that is adding 2x.
Oh, wait.
That's where I get that for.
Oh, sorry. Opposite.
This one, yeah, this one. Yeah, those 2x's cancel. I'm left with 10 is equal to 8, which we know we can't do. So that means this side gives us no solution. It doesn't mean that our whole answer is no solution. It just means this equation is not going to give us anything. We still have to do the other one. Okay, the other one's going to give us an answer -4.5 or -9.5. So the point on this one is even if one of your two equations gives us no solution, we still have to do the other one. Okay, we still got to solve the other side. Okay. It's a lot, okay? A lot of new stuff. Any questions about it? please ask questions when you're doing the homework. If you have questions, please ask for help. Okay, go ahead. We're